Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Ken Tarza. I'm one of the senior federal DOE managers here in Oak Ridge. And when Jim asked me to introduce our guest speaker and said, well, you probably don't know this guy, I figured he was scraping the bottom of the barrel for introducers. I've never gotten to do this before, so it's like, oh, wow, it's Christmas time. But actually, especially after last week, Kathy Toth, it's my brother, family connection, all that. Well, Darren isn't my brother and he's not family, but I do know Darren. We met probably 4 or 5 years ago through a local military Christian lay ministry organization I'm the local contact for. And it's been great to get to know him because I know his heart, I know his passion, I know his integrity, and I know he's the real deal. So I think you'll really enjoy his talk today about his business, which is Veteran Ventures Capital. And you may wonder what that is. He will tell you all about it, but think of it as military Shark Tank. Everybody watch Shark Tank? Anybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. Well, that's what he does, except with the military flavor. Lieutenant Colonel retired Darren Burrell has over 28 years as a professional financial manager in both the public and private sectors. He is the founder and managing partner of Veteran Ventures Capital, or VVC, an investment and consulting firm focused on scaling veteran-owned businesses by fusing resources and mentoring with years of fiscal and operational experience. Darren oversees all aspects of VVC operations and management of the Veteran Fund One, which invests in early stage growth companies. He has assembled an impressive team of investors, advisors, and mentors that he will tell you more about in a bit. Prior to starting VVC, Darren was the chief operating officer and a fiduciary for Knoxville-based TAG Resources, a financial services company, where he used military principles to double the company size, triple the assets under management to more than $2 billion, and increase the company's $6 million value. Less than 2 weeks ago, TAG Resources sold to Transamerica for $34 million. Before transitioning to private sector work in 2015, Darren was a career public sector financial manager as an Air Force officer. His career highlights include working at the Pentagon. It's not really a highlight, but it was a very important job. Working at the Pentagon as flying operations analyst for the Air Force, where he managed a $15 billion budget, multiple deployments as a deputy comptroller and resource director in a joint assignment to Iraq and Afghanistan, managing a $20 billion budget, and serving as resource director for the White House Communication Agency, where he managed a $350 million budget and worked directly with senior White House, congressional, comptroller, Secret Service, State Department, and Defense Information Systems Agency staff in direct support of the president. While in this position, he was selected for promotion to colonel, which means he did very well, but Darren chose to retire instead and transition to the private sector after 21 years of military service. Darren is a graduate of the Citadel and holds advanced degrees from the Air Force Institute of Technology and Central Michigan University. He is an accredited investment fiduciary, a certified defense financial manager, and is level 3 certified in the Secretary of Defense Financial Management Program. He is also the past recipient of numerous military awards and recognitions, including 2 times Air Force Budget Officer of the Year, Air Force Financial Management Officer of the Year, Comptroller of the Year, and U.S. Air Force's Europe James E. Short Award for Outstanding Contribution to Mentorship and Career Development. Darren is also a family man and a man of faith. He and his lovely wife, Gloria, have 5 children and live in Knoxville. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Darren Burrell.
Well, thank you, Ken. The mic is on. I appreciate that intro, and just really excited to be here. I know that that this is commonplace for a lot of y'all, but this is a real privilege. Jim, what you have built here in E-Tech is something really special. I remember being invited by you here about 5 years ago, and actually sitting in the back row, thinking about this thing called Veteran Ventures Capital, and seeing the great work that is going on in here and what you've developed, and seeing it transition through the years is pretty exciting. And I'm just honored to be here and excited to tell you all a little bit about what we have going on here in Veteran Ventures Capital. So as far as the intro, Veteran Ventures, we're a growth equity investment fund. And like Ken said, it's akin to a lot of things you see on Shark Tank. except with a military flavor. But this presentation is more about veteran entrepreneurs. We're going to talk a lot about what veterans do, what veteran venture capital does in terms of how we take care of both the investments in the businesses that we invest in, as well as the investors, why we're different and why we think it's a really unique opportunity that is based right here in Knoxville, in the Knoxville metro area, but it's really locally thriving but nationally connected. So we'll go through all of these things in the next few minutes. Make sure I'm able to go. Oh, there we go. Okay, so as we I want to set the stage for you if I can. When you think of times of crisis and when our nation has times of crisis, who do they turn to? Whether that's a conflict, a natural disaster, or I don't know, even a pandemic. Well, it's really the military, right? They help lead our country through these periods of uncertainty. If you think about the training and the ability to adapt and overcome what the business realm calls pivoting, well, the military and the veterans are used to doing that on the battlefield. And the thesis of Veteran Fund One is that when they take off the uniform, that ability to get things done and to execute does not change. When they transition to the private sector, it actually thrives, if given the right opportunity, that is. So veteran-owned businesses, it's a really unique area to be in because they are what are called underrepresented groups in alternative capital or venture capital, meaning they're 30% less likely to receive venture funding, even though statistically they out-earn their non-veteran counterparts. So there's this arbitrage that we're taking advantage of that I'll go through and talk through, but just to realize that this area that we're talking about here is very unique. It's an outstanding opportunity, and it's really an area that is poised for growth in the future years. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the investment thesis on this slide, and it really comes down to two different areas. One is people, and the other is deal flow and technologies. So the people part here is on what the left side, if you will, and the deals and the deal flow is on the right side. So talking about veteran leadership, and what I'll kind of talk to you about here is we have a white paper actually developed by ORNL's very own Mason Rice, one of our co-founders. He's probably working right now, but it talks about the characteristics of Fortune 500 CEOs. When you think about their ability to make decisions in a time-constrained environment, or their focus and their ability to adapt to changing circumstances. All of these characteristics that they have, well, they're taught from the military, from the ground up. Doesn't matter what service you're in, Army, Navy, Air Force. Doesn't matter if you're officer and enlisted. It means that they have incredible leadership opportunities, technical skills that are, high tech. We're talking biotechs, space, robotics, everything that you hear about and that a lot of people in this room do, that's taught in the military as well. Education is another key component of what the military brings. The government invests billions in developing our nation's leaders. They gave or helped me get 3 master's degrees, and I'm kind of the dumb one of the group. You'll see the rest of my folks, 3 of the folks on the team have PhDs, all funded by the military. And so there's this great legacy of what veterans have brought to the table in terms of both public service and private service. What do I mean by that? Well, after World War II and onward, and we've even talked about I've talked about it to some of the people in this room, there was a propensity of over 50% of veterans came back from those conflicts and started their own businesses. And some of the names are pretty impressive in terms of what they were not only successful, they transformed the landscape of business for the U.S. for decades to come. Think FedEx, Walmart, Enterprise, U-Haul, the list goes on and on. Kinder Morgan, USAA, GoDaddy, even all these different businesses that were successful, they were all started by veterans. I call those the pre-9/11 veteran. Post-9/11 veteran, as I just discussed to you, has access to greater technologies, greater educational requirements, and just incredible training. But what has occurred is that same percentage, that over 50% has dropped down to a desire of 25% to start their own business. But the actual execution of that desire is less than 5%. And the number one limiting factor cited is access to capital. It's just a very competitive market out there, and that's where Veteran Fund One comes into play. So that's the opportunity there, where we know that there is leadership qualities out there, the same that Fortune 500 CEOs, which are, by the way, pre 9/11, for decades, most of those CEOs have had some level of military experience. And now we're seeing what we're trying to do is bring that back to the forefront. Our team, number 2 there, I have an actual couple of slides talking about them, but the amount of experiences and successes that we've assembled is something really exciting and far-reaching at all levels of government, and successful exits in the private sector, and just this incredible knowledge of how the government works and how we can help tailor our deal flow to that. So that's deal flow. Number 3. What you'll see is that, Veteran Fund One, we invest in veteran-owned businesses, and but within that, we kind of focus in this national security and defense sector, which I know is near and dear to a lot of folks in this room. We'll talk a little bit more about why we do that. But the amount of deal flow that we get is astronomical. It's very healthy through the different partnerships that we have, both in governmental, quasi-governmental, private, and military-centric networks. And the market opportunity, we'll talk about that as well. In fact, I've got a whole slide on that. Really, what this slide is showing you is somewhat straightforward. If you want to make money in the public sector and publicly traded companies, invest in defense. That's what this chart shows. The valuations of defense and governmental services basically has doubled and continues to grow ever since 2013. The government budget has increased, obviously, throughout this time period as well, the defense budget in particular. And we take advantage of that because within our area of expertise, we look at logistics companies, cyber or security companies, whether that's cybersecurity, data security, or physical security, and even aerospace. That's what I did when I was active duty, contracting and procurement actions to bring combat capability higher. And all of these things where this is what we focus on in the private sector to help bring them to scale further and faster. And if I can say, our secret sauce is the ability, the things that we have done as a team for the government in terms of understanding contracting. A lot of you in here do government contracts, and that's not an easy thing to wrap yourself around. Once you do that, though, it's a pretty nice way to serve as a counter-cyclical business economic kind of buffer for those types of downturns. So again, the veteran population, over 19 million, 250,000 people transition out of the service every year. There are over 3 million businesses today that are owned by veterans across the country. And that equates to almost 30% of all businesses, when less than 8% have actually served. That means, again, veterans are punching above their weight, and the opportunity is really big. The double bottom impact, I'll talk to you again. There's this idea of supporting veterans when they transition, which is a great opportunity, but I'm saying that they can make a great business case, and you can make a lot of money off of them too, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's that double bottom impact. The last line there about diversity, there's been a lot of social injustice and unrest across the country over the last several years. But when I was serving, I had bosses that were male, female, Latino, African-American, all kinds. You know what they cared about? Execution. Can you get the job done? There's built-in diversity in there that we also see in our deal flow. So I told you a little bit about the veteran, what they bring to the table. I told you about the market opportunity. Now let's talk a little bit about the team. What you have here on this slide is really the enablers. These are folks that some of you have heard of, minus me. I'm assuming that y'all just met me for the first time for the most part today. But I told you a little bit about my background. The rest of these people on this slide are enablers. Ken Hirsch, who formed and NGP Energy. Some of you may be familiar with that company. He's also president of the George W. Bush Institute at the Presidential Library, and met him last year through the Scholars Program that I was part of. Told him about what we were doing, and he immediately jumped on board and wanted to sponsor our fund, larger investor in the fund. Up here to the right here, Phyllis Newhouse, based down the road here in Atlanta, may have run into her company as well. That's a minority service disabled veteran-owned company that's doing about 200 million in revenue a year through government contracts. A lot of our portfolio companies want to grow up to be her. And she's a great example. She loves what she knows, the potential here, and that's why she came into the fund as well. Of course, the one you probably have heard of is General Stanley McChrystal. Stan has, of course, architect of a lot of the counterinsurgency operations and his special operations background, especially in Afghanistan. And he and I have partnered together too. He's an investor and advisor into the funds and to our companies. And so he has been a tremendous asset in bringing more recognition and further investors into that fund. And his consulting group is an invaluable resource for our team. So that's the enablers. Here, these are the workhorses of the company. The general partnership here, I'm not going to go through every one of them, but represented on this slide, you see 2 times corporate venture capital, you see 2 PhDs, you see a CPA, over 3 billion in mergers and acquisitions done, a couple of exits in here with Josh Weed up there in the top corner. He and I served together in the Pentagon nearly 20 years ago, so we've known each other for quite a long time. Steve Kaiser and him were doctoral candidates together at the RAND Corporation. And he himself was an Air Force intel officer who has incredible knowledge of the non-dilutive funding that the government offers. So this is the other part of our secret sauce, if I can, is how we help these companies, not only with an investment and with connections, but also with non-dilutive funding. Steve has garnered over 1.6 million in non-dilutive funding on top of our equity investments for the 5 investments that we have today. Talk a little bit more about that when we get to the companies. So everything, all of the defense sector, healthcare, IT, the security side of the house, these all have subject matter expertise in these areas. So again, that's the people. How about the opportunities here? This is that balanced workflow and essentially the way that we find great deals are through partnerships, it's through relationships. And some of these areas, like in the defense side, AFWERX is where we got a lot of these SBIR monies for our portfolio companies. One of the folks on that team used to work for me when I was active duty, so we have these ins that a lot of other people don't. We're part of that trusted capital network, which allows us to access to sensitive and national security related initiatives. And I can go on and on. The military-centric network, the one area I'll talk about here is Bunker Labs. That is a nonprofit, a nationwide nonprofit, got about 20,000 people in it. Some of you know that I founded a chapter here in Knoxville. And what we've undergone this year is the very first in-residence business accelerator strictly for veterans in Knoxville. It meets the KEC downtown once a week for 6 months and helps take their businesses to the next level. David, whom you heard about, he's part of this cohort right now. So it's really taking, putting action and allowing great ability to see businesses in action. On the private partnership side, a lot of opportunities here as well. I'll highlight 2. Sheltowee Angel Network, that's based right out of here, out of Knoxville, and it's across the country, or mostly the Southeast in terms of the different angel networks it's a part of. Eric Dobson, whom some of you may know, actually took me under his wing for a year. And the Innovate 865, the alliance that ORNL and that other folks like TVA, UT, well, we're a part of that group as well. And they are committed to helping breed entrepreneurial activity and growth in the startup community right here in this region too. A lot of great opportunities, and again, that locally thriving but nationally connected mentality that we can do right here in our backyard. So that's it. That's the that's the intro, if you will, of the people, the opportunity, and the relationships. But now let's talk about execution. What have we done? We've actually invested in 5 companies to date. We're about to do a couple more that'll hit the streets here in about a week. But our first portfolio company, Haven Lock, based right here in Tennessee, right down the street in Nashville. This is a great company. The CEO, Alex Bertelli, special operations guy, was busting down some doors in Afghanistan that he couldn't get them. And the Taliban were using, among other things, locking mechanisms at the bottom and the top of the door, as opposed to a traditional deadbolt. He came home and made a business out of it. Haven Lock was on Shark Tank a couple of seasons ago. We invested in them right before that. They've shot up over the years in their physical security system. As you walk through the door, close it behind you, and this real barrier raises up behind you, either manually or through Bluetooth. And it's a security system that is so strong, it's 10 times stronger than a deadbolt. But what he did is what a lot of veterans do. He saw a need and he pivoted. Y'all remember a lot of the active shooter scenarios that were played in our country. And he said, I think we can develop a solution that mitigates that. So Haven Lockdown was born upon our investment in them. They took that money and they developed a commercial solution as opposed to just a residential one. So now think about campuses, universities, libraries, auditoriums, these areas that have a lot of doors and the propensity for bad things to happen. Well, now let's say if a campus where something occurs where there's an active shooter scenario. Well, that superintendent could hit a button and lock down all of his doors in the push of a button, or a section of that campus, wherever it's at, or even delegate it down to the teacher level if they see it first, and they can lock down their room. Again, mitigate that risk until the authorities arrive. Well, this took notice, and one of the largest security firms in the nation, Johnson Controls, they said, we like this thing. We want it part of our national security smart solution. And so they partnered with them. And over $1 million later of investment in purchases, it looks like this is the strategic partner that's going to help them go into the large commercial category across the country in accordance with some of the infrastructure initiatives that our current administration is doing. So again, this is when we got into them, we typically look at companies that are post-revenue, that are generating a little bit of momentum, but they are wanting to take their operations to the next level. That's what happened here. They've doubled their revenue nearly every year since we've invested with them. And that's just the first investment. And we were the first institutional money in there. So this is the last one I'll go through, just due to time sake. The Silent Arrow is a logistics cargo drone company. So a word, probably just give you the idea of what they do. When you think about the movies where you see C-130 flying, the back of that C-130, a big pallet of cargo comes out with a parachute on top and sometimes makes it to the destination. So what these guys have done is this same cargo drone comes out, can hold almost 2,000 pounds worth of supplies and equipment. Comes out of the back of that same C-130, sprouts wings like a switchblade knife, and then uses GPS and LiDAR to glide to the destination and park on a dime. So this is a real world opportunity that is being sought after today in the Ukraine. And what we did when we invested with them, they actually have, they have international orders, over $1 million flowed from Israel because they like this program so much. They've garnered almost $1 million in non-dilutive funding that we helped write those grants for SBIRs. But now, through our connections within the humanitarian realm, this is drastically needed over in Ukraine right now. And the head of the NGO operations for that entire country is part of our network. And so we're cutting them in place. And we're talking just potential for really putting this company on the map. And again, we were the first institutional money in, and we understand the background of these guys that are just all about execution and getting the mission done. So I won't, the next three I'll kind of like move through a little bit quicker. But I can tell you that every one of these is disrupting technology and is doing things that are going to make not only the security of our nation safer, but also make a very large return for our investors. This is RFID tracking, asset management tracking technology. Met these gentlemen a couple of years ago, and I introduced them to the SBIR process because what they are basically saying is, hey, we want to be the backup to autonomous driving. I was like, hey, that's a great idea. You know, it's obviously the wave of the future when GPS and other things don't work well. These guys come into play. But why not? I think the Air Force would use this. And so a couple of years later, they are on the cusp of getting a $7 million contract from Air Combat Command to do munitions flight line tracking or munitions tracking on the flight line. Again, great opportunity. We got into them again, first institutional money, and they're taking these large steps forward in a massive way there, where they could go from a couple 100,000 to several million in 1 year. Veritex, this company is run by a former colonel as well. He is think supply chain and blockchain supply management to the DoD. Okay, I can tell you when I was active duty and I was managing the money on bases, we were using 70s technology to track the different parts for the aircraft, and we're trying to put it together. These guys have received $2.9 million in non-dilutive funding to help fix that problem. They are going to be doing some great things as well. The last one here is a little bit out of the ordinary. I told you we focus on the national security and defense side, but that's not all. Okay, if it's going to make our investors a 10x return in 3 to 5 years, and it's run by a veteran, we're certainly taking a look at it. Hero Beverage is a little, like I said, it's a more of a CPG type of a consumer good, but we resonated big with their mission. Hero stands for helping everyone remain operational. And the big thing about these guys is they did almost $5 million in revenue last year. I don't know that most of you have heard of. But if you watch Cobra Kai on Netflix this season, take a look at some of the strategic placements of some of the advertised. You'll see Hero Beverage there for coffee purposes. So take a look at that. These guys are using all kinds of different networks to grow, and they're slated to do $8 million in revenue this year. So everything is on the table. We have subject matter expertise in some areas, but some of them don't need that, and they're still going to grow. So the way venture capital works is not unlike making a diversified portfolio in your investments. We have found different ways to mitigate risk, to make sure we're diversified appropriately. We add value through that non-dilutive means. If we can get the government to pay for R&D for a year or two, why not? You know, and help take the investor dollar when they bring it into the fund. For every dollar that we receive, we like to supplement that with a dollar from again, governmental sources. And every investment that we go into is looking for that 10x return mentality. Quite frankly, the way it typically works, and some of you understand this as well too, is that they come in, they do some business for the government, and then a larger prime contractor comes in and absorbs them into their overall, portfolio of skill set. And I showed you in the beginning that return profile of the defense companies. They trade at upwards of 15, 16 times their EBITDA. So it takes a little bit of revenue growth to make a nice return when they're acquired by that large prime contractor. That's that liquidation event that occurs and goes back to our investors. Now, the technicals of the term is, hey, this is just a normal venture capital fund. As far as the paperwork and the return profile, that's not sexy at all. Okay, what is our focus and the veterans and the way they do one thing better than anybody else, and that's execute. They make things happen. This particular fund is poised. We've raised 15 of our $50 million, and that's really the where the fund is beginning, is trying to make sure that we get fully capitalized so that these 5 that I just showed you about turn into about 25 to 30 companies. And that's the first fund, and then obviously we go on and grow from there. So that's the summary, if you will, of what we're doing here. And there's really 2 asks and 2 things that you can do to help. Number one is, again, we're still fully capitalizing the fund, and the opportunity is there for y'all. Out of that 15 million, less than 2 million is local. And I think that locally thriving and nationally connected thing can mean so much more when we get the right partners in who have an affinity for the military, but also have an affinity to make a return, right? And I think there's a lot of people in this room. Always. So the other thing is we're always looking for good deals. We're always looking for those businesses that have a veteran in leadership or on the cap table, or typically both. It does not have to be 100% owned operation by all veterans. We have some of those, but they're very few. It can be 5% ownership. Those types of deals we are looking for. They're post-revenue. They have that security or defense focus, which again, really resonates well with this region. That's why we love being in Knoxville. We love being a part of what we're doing here and how it can just affect the whole country, our nation. So that's the formal part of the presentation. Any questions before I turn it back over to Jim? Yes, sir.
Willing to educate veterans as they come out about the opportunities that you could provide.
That's a great question. His question.
Let me add to it.
Oh, sure. Mhm.
You educate them that it's available, and how do you educate them to understand what it means to them?
Okay, so the question is about educating the service members that are coming out, how to take advantage and become entrepreneurs and really transition into a new career like I did when I came out. And the great thing is there's plenty of resources that we're aligned with and partnered with to do that. The biggest one I'll tell you is Bunker Labs. If you're not familiar with them, I highly encourage you to check them out at bunkerlabs.org. But their mission is to help veterans and spouses start businesses. That's what they do. And so when we came, when I met the leaders over 5 years ago there, and I found out what they were doing, I said, well, that's the same thing that I do, except I just had money, right? And so that was the partnership that we have that goes about throughout the country. They're in 42 of the 50 states. Again, 20,000 people strong. But that's what they do. They're partnered with the likes of J.P. Morgan, Ford Foundation, Bob Woodruff Foundation, all these different people that help it to be a very well-funded nonprofit that goes around, has accelerators like ours. Only about 22 of those in the nation right now. So Knoxville is one of the few that actually has that in-residence accelerator piece. But that's one of the reasons, or one of the ways that we can get the word across. The second is that we're called upon routinely to talk to some of the transitioning members, whether they're going after their GI Bill, things like that, where they're looking for entrepreneurial advice. And I'm called upon routinely to speak at some of those accelerator-ish type of entrepreneurial courses. And then there's just getting the word out of the local area of what we do and what we're trying to stimulate in the local economy. And that's done through Innovate 865. Courtney Piper's here to talk a little bit more about that as well. But there's just a lot of different ways that we try to spread the word, if you will. And I encourage y'all to take a look at our website, veteranventures.us. We're in all the different areas that help spread the word as much as possible. So it is a grassroots type of thing, but I will tell you it's working. We get about 10 pitches and applications a week today, okay, which we saw about 500 deals last year. So, and it's very typical in the venture capital space to have about 1 to 5% investment rate, which is what we get. And so there is great innovation out there today. And the reason why we focus in that defense sector is because veterans have a leg up. They serve on the other side of the coin. They know how that works. Then they come into the private sector and they find out, man, I can do this for a living again, and I can make a very good return. And they just need some level of access to capital to make that happen. That's what we come in. Does that answer your question? What else?
Didn't see anything about a partnership with Three Roots Capital. Dave's on their board. Three Roots puts another kind of money into the equation. Have you been talking to Grady?
Go to our website and you look at advisors, you'll see Grady there. Grady Vanderhooven has been a great mentor as well. In fact, our next Bunker Labs event on March 29th. It's number one, it's taking place downtown at a veteran-owned brewery called Next Level Brewery. Highly encourage y'all to come. Our featured guest speaker is none other than Grady Vanderhoof. He will be talking about all the different initiatives that they have.
Interested in being part of what you're doing.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, and the question is, how do you invest, right? I think that's really what you said. There's really a couple of different ways. So traditional limited partners in a venture capital fund is $1 million buy, right? And that's where most of ours fall. However, we also, I wanted this to be a participating agent for veterans as well. There's not a whole lot of billionaire veterans out there, right? It's just not what we serve. So what we set up is also this micro fund where we pool together small investors till we hit that $1 million threshold, partnered with a veteran financial advisor to do that. He manages this LLC. They hit $1 million within a few months of actually starting this thing together. And so now it's kind of like for $25,000 or less, no, $25,000 or more, you can come into there. So if you're a smaller investor, that's an opportunity. But we are looking for those partners that can help us really scale quicker in a larger investment category. So there's two different ways to get in, and I'm happy to talk to them further about that.
Thank you for your presentation. What happens if the defense spending flat?
Well, that's great. A good thought process on that is that's actually occurred since 2013, right? And so previous administrations have seen this cyclical way. But the cool thing about the defense industry is that even in the midst of stagnating or even contracting budgets, there are certain areas that we focus on, like the security side and like the area of aerospace, to include Space Force now. Our next investment will be in that arena. So we take a look at some of the folks that are on our team, a couple of general law areas of expertise. It's no secret that right now cybersecurity is a big deal, and that's some area where we're focusing as well. But the logistics side and the different ways that we can try to bring more material into both humanitarian and operational areas, that's why we chose Silent Arrow. So the bottom line is that if you know where the defense money is going, even in a constricted area, those margins are still growing in terms of the defense sector, because of the different ways that the military allocate whatever resources it has. So it's not an area that it's going to stagnate from time to time, but it tends to grow over time as well. Does that answer your question?
Curious about how you had one Tennessee example that I saw up there. How much of your investments?
Well, we do. Well, then the amount of dollars is what I had, less than $2 million actually from Tennessee. But I will say that that what we're trying to do, again, like through the business accelerator here, is generate more deal flow within Tennessee. Tennessee is like 15th in the nation in terms of veteran population. There is a lot of opportunity here. It's just a matter of really educating them and helping give them the tools to develop and start businesses. Now, we don't invest in pre-revenue companies, but we certainly help them. And we have angel networks like the Shell II Angel Network, or even FreeRoots that help those companies get ready for venture capital. So it's about developing that ecosystem, which is why we are a part of some of the different initiatives that we are.
So when we were looking at the first firm that talked about the security system, what was the intellectual property? I know they're partnering with Johnson Control, but what protects them?
Yeah, that's a key part of the due diligence process, They have over four patents, both regionally, both in the US and across the world. So there's a lot of different moats, if you will, for each one of these companies on why they're able to do something in a differentiated fashion, but also protect that IP so that they can partner with the right people and grow, but still be able to be their own individual selves. So these guys have multiple patents on the technology, on the way that it's used, on the encryption, why it's really hard to break that technology too. And so that makes them attractive, right? For that private acquisition that should occur shortly after we get engaged with them and help them scale. So that's one of the reasons why Johnson Controls likes them, because they can't do it without them, and so that's really, really key point, and I appreciate you bringing up, is that there has to be that differentiator. There has to be that ability to protect and have that moat in any investment. And we look for that as part of our diligence process.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, see Lieutenant Governor McNally who's joined us today. Always glad to have you here with us. Do we have any announcements from anyone? Anyone online?
I have one more.
Oh, sure.
Jim, would you come up here? Once again, I wanted to thank you again for, getting the right spot. For just the opportunity to come over here. And one of the things we do at BBC is when we develop a partnership with someone, we like to solidify that partnership through the use of a military tradition called the challenge point. And so what we have here is the challenge point for Veteran Ventures Capital. And it has on one side our logo, and on the other side our core values: integrity, discipline, and excellence. And I just want to thank you for the work that you've done. I know you're transitioning to a new role, and we're excited to see what life brings for you. But thank you for all that you've done in here and for veterans. All right.
Okay, well, I hope you'll be back with us next week. Our program on global security with Dr. Krista Weedian from the Baker Center at UT. Taylor, this is a highlight of your spring break. Thanks for spending part of it. So have a good weekend.
But they're all right.